Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a virtual event at the Poison Pen. I'm delighted to say it's our very first one in Berlin, Germany. Such is the magic of Zoom. That we are in Germany was Sebastian Fitzek and his new book, The Package. Joining us is the wonderful Karin Slaughter from an undisclosed location in Georgia, although it actually looks like your real office, is it?
Yes. Yeah, no, this is a friend's place. She's a really big fan.
And I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we've mastered the time zones and all the rest. And let me introduce Sebastian to you because he's new to us and new to you, many of you watching this. But in point of fact, he's Germany's most successful author of psychological thrillers. His books have sold 11 million copies, been translated into 24 languages, are the basis for international cinema adaptations. Am I right that it's been 4 movies so far, Sebastian?
That's right, for big screen and free TV. Yeah, right.
Fabulous. And also theater adaptations. And he's the first German author to be awarded the European Prize for Criminal Literature. Now, is that a sort of a German version of the French? I know the French have. Karin, have you not won that French award?
No, damn it. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No.
I'm trying
No, I won the Golden Bootstrap in Holland. Everyone knows that's the big award.
Well, it's interesting to me, all the names. I'm going to digress for a minute because in Sweden, it's the glass bell. And I'm trying to remember. I know to call them Roman Policier, but I can't remember the name of the award. Crumb. Well, anyway.
I believe it's the Pas du Fromage.
What? Cheese? Seriously? Well,
why not?
No, it will come to me. One of the disadvantages, Sebastian, of my aging brain is that it takes sometimes 5 or 10 minutes for words to emerge.
Yeah, we'll be talking and Barbara will say, I remember.
Right. You two youngsters, there we go. So anyway, The Package is Sebastian's new book, published in England by Head of Zeus and now over here in the United States. I'm trying to remember, Sebastian, I should have looked. Is this? Yeah, it is. So this is a Head of Zeus British book, but it is distributed in the United States. And I think that Nick Cheatham, Sebastian, makes really beautiful books.
Yeah, I love him, and I love the way he thinks and goes unusual ways. And it's great that he gave me the opportunity to get published.
There are not as many German authors published in the U.S., especially in crime fiction, as other countries, and I've never been entirely sure why. Do either of you have a thought about that?
Yeah, I can. I can tell because
you have too many American writers.
You have a heritage of great American authors. I'm actually honored to speak to one, to Karin, and it's. I don't think that you necessarily wait for especially a German crime author to come over to the US because you have already plenty of good ones. Actually, for me, the American crime writers, they invented the thriller genre for me because I grew up as a child of the 80s with, of course, as so many with King, which actually he is not a crime writer, he's more like a horror author, but Grisham, for example, or Michael Crichton, or, Karin Slaughter, which then I adored from 2003 on. I guess it was my first book, which when I started reading your books, and so there's so many great authors. Then of course the question is why publish and translate someone else?
Well, but we are seeing some of it. Iceland has produced, as Karin mentioning, Ursa Sigurðardóttir recently. There are several Icelandic authors in translation, so why not German? Anyway, here you are in the pack. So Karin, do I assume that you have carefully prepared questions that you are going to fling at Sebastian, and I'll just sit here being odd?
Well, you just never know which Karin's going to show up, do you, Barbara? I've got some questions.
I love doing stuff with you because I don't ever know. It's so much fun.
Well, should I start it off?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Sebastian, where are you? Like I'm saying, is this your kitchen where you keep books or?
No, actually, this is the only place in the house which is a little bit quiet. I recently became a father of a young boy, and so this is like a study room. But I'm able to close the doors and to have Zoom calls and meetings like this.
So you go in this little room and you do your business, and then you go out and they don't care who you are or what you've been doing. They just want you to be dad, and
Yeah, yeah.
no big deal.
I think this is great because even if in Germany some people know my name or recognize my face, it's not that you're always grounded by the family, of course, who never thinks about you being an author or something important. But also when you go into public, even if they have read your books or know your name, it's not usual that they recognize you.
Yeah. I think it's like one of the things that I have to qualify, because when people find out you're an author, they're like, "Oh, are you famous?" And you're like, "I'm author famous." So.
And I don't know, it's in the US, but in Germany, there are only two questions to author. The first, the one is, can you live by the money that you earn? Or
Yeah.
the other thing is, are you a millionaire? There's only those two questions.
Right.
Nothing in between.
Well, the thing I found interesting about Germany, for me as an American traveling, I have a translator, Regula Vinska, who's a fantastic writer in her own right. She's in Hamburg. And then they'll have someone who does a dramatic reading of my books. And usually it's this woman who's great, Nina. I can't remember her last name because it's very German. But one year I was with the guy in Germany who dubbed all the James Bond films and is the voice of James Bond. And he was a rock star. And people would ask him to say Bond, James Bond. All the time. So it was a real introduction into, I'm author famous, but he's like movie famous.
That's right. It's really funny because dubbing is huge in Germany, which sometimes I had an American friend, and the first time he was in Berlin, he was in the hotel room and he saw a Tom Hanks movie, and he was like, "Are you insane? I mean, you know that he's American, but now he speaks German. How can you follow this?" But this is how we grew up. But due to streaming now, we are more and more addicted to the original version.
Yeah. Well, there's three things that I think everybody is surprised about in Germany. One is like the level of meat that is consumed.
Yeah.
The other is the dubbing. And I guess there's four actually. One is that the town of Ausfahrt is the biggest town in Germany, because that's the word for exit. So you see asphalt all over the place.
Yeah.
But also German porn, you're like, oh my God. it's not in the hotel rooms. It's quite startling, especially if you've eaten a lot of meat. But with your stuff,
what's the correlation? I'd pause. I have to ask you that.
It's like I gotta leave my shirt on. I just, I feel like there's you get to a certain level of meat, you just start to sweat, and then you see these hairless German pornographers, and it's very startling. Okay. You know what I'm talking about, Barbara. Don't pretend.
Hey,
Sebastian, though, so did you notice that you went from author famous to more famous when you had stuff on television and films and all that? And
actually, it's really interesting that people that TV always really creates awareness. If people see you on camera, so it's more like doing interviews, being in talk shows. This is something when you get recognized. But the movie, and unless you don't play the lead role, which I don't, it was not such an impulse. But the funny story is that in 2006, with Therapy, my first novel was released, and this was a few weeks after I was in the bookstore, actually to buy my own book, but not for me, because I wanted to give a copy to a friend who was waiting outside. And I was so proud because the bookseller recognized me, and she said, I was just paying, oh, are you Sebastian Fitzek, the author? And I said, well, yeah. How you know? And she said, well, yeah, your name is on the credit card you want to pay. So this is usually the trick. If you want to get recognized, then you just have to hand over a credit card, and maybe they remember your name, not necessarily your face, which is a good situation.
Yeah, I would hate to be recognized. Well, you know, it reminds me of this story that Harlan Coben told me years ago. He said that your family will buy the book but not read it, but your friends will read the book but not buy it. So you've just proven this story. Well, were you happy with the adaptations? Or, I mean, I don't want you to sit and grouse, but you know, obviously it's a different format, so they have to change stuff. But
definitely. And I know this, but there were, it's so and so. There were really two very good movies. One, I'm not sure if you can receive with the subtitles on Netflix. It's called Cut Off. And there will be a US release, and this was really a great movie. I loved it a lot. But then there are others, and to me, I know that they have to change something, but there are some core elements of a book which readers and fans, they really are searching for. And if they miss them, or even worse, if they're totally changed, then you have a problem. So so it's really important to find out which are the core elements of your novel, and then to make sure that you find them in the adaptation. And if it's in it, then you can change a lot around it,
right,
to make it fit to the screen. So it was sometimes good, sometimes bad. What are your experiences?
well, I'm in the middle of it. They just started filming in Australia, and
Great.
you know, it's very easy to write stuff on the page because it's just you, and you know, you can put 6,000 extras in, and no one has to pay for them.
That's right.
But I mean, it's been kind of fascinating just watching the process and reading the scripts. And one thing I never considered is that the writers are also creative people, so they really want to put their imprint on it. And then if you have, like, Toni Collette is in Pieces of Her, which is what it's called, and she's had some really good input on what she thinks of this character. And it's gone from this thing I wrote in my pajamas to like actual creative people getting together and being creative about it, which is sort of exciting to me to see the interpretation. I mean, that's what people need to know. It's not an adaptation, it's an interpretation, you know?
That's right.
And I know that lots of people always say the book is better, which I'm fine with. But you know, I mean, it's been really fascinating. It's been sad not to be there because I love Australia, but also, you know, I'd love to see it. Do you get to go on the sets, and are you an extra in anything?
Yeah, if I have the chance to, I love to do it, but I'm not the one who jumps behind the director or in front of the director and tries to change something. I heard of a colleague in Germany. She writes historical novels, and she was, I think she was really annoying on the set.
That's a good way to never have anything else again, isn't it?
Yeah.
So can I just make a commercial break here for a second? Karin's movie that she's talking about is for a book called Pieces of Her, which was a standalone that Karin wrote. It's not in her current Will Trent series. So for those of you who didn't hear, Pieces of Her. Karin, do you know when the release date is, or is that too far in the future?
You know, probably the end of this year or early next year. But like Sebastian raised a good point about, you know, Netflix, they have to, for Germany, they have to dub it. For Holland, they have to subtitle it. For, you know, so it's 160 something countries, right? Is that right, Sebastian? And they have to cater to each individual one.
It can be, yeah.
Right. We talked to Jane Harper last night, and her movie The Dry has been released in Australia.
Number one. Number
Yep,
one.
but it hasn't been released so that we can see it. But the other thing I wanted to make a pitch for those of you watching interested in movies and adaptations, is there's a channel called MHZ, Michael Harvey Zebra, and it is an international TV streaming service here, and there are loads of German-produced series on it, some which are made from books and some which I think are created wholly for MHC. But Netflix is not the only, the only streaming service, although it's a big one. But there really are some great things on MHC, and one of them was filmed at Lake Constance, which I thought was absolutely fabulous. It's right on the German-Austrian border, so you had all kinds of nifty things going. Do I have the right lake? You're looking at me funny.
Yeah,
it is the lake between Germany and Austria, right?
Pardon me?
I said it is a lake. The lake that Germany and Austria is, it is Lake Constance in one. Okay,
yeah, largest in Europe, isn't it? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. But anyway, that's a place where Americans can watch German productions, and of course they have subtitles in English, obviously.
Very good.
So, anyway, I digress. Sorry, back to you, Karin.
That reminds me, when I was in Germany a few years ago, I was on a yacht in Lake Constance, and we went to across the lake, and we were picked up in a car and taken to a Zeppelin, and we flew in a Zeppelin over Lake Constance. Because that's what you do in Germany, right, Sebastian?
Actually, I that's not the usual.
Really? I said treat me like a local.
Yeah. No, I think they treat like you're like a #1 best-selling author, which you are in Germany as well. So no, I have to say one thing that might sound a little bit arrogant, but Berliners, and I'm a born Berliner, they don't necessarily consider them being German citizens, because I grew up in West Berlin, and we always felt like something special when we were kids, because there was the wall, but we were allowed to travel, which the East Berliners wasn't. So we felt special. For us, it was only Berlin, and Germany was something else. And now, so I would consider myself being a Berlin author, and mostly all of my books take place in Berlin, which I think is the only city where my kind of stories really could happen. Maybe in Frankfurt as well, and Hamburg, but not necessarily in Constance.
Well, it's not as multicultural there, let's say that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, because you had in Berlin, which you have everything, despite mountains and the sea. There's everything, and you really don't have a problem to get in a bar and have so many different kinds of people coming together from every nation. There in another city of Berlin, this might be problematic.
Well, let's actually talk about your books now. I mean, if you want. I took therapy with me on a plane years ago, and I landed, and therapy is about this big in English, and in German it's like this big. So I was like, what am I missing? Let's talk about Berlin though, and how, I mean, what comes first, Berlin or the story, or where does that come, where does it branch together for you?
People always are smiling when it says I get the first idea out of my everyday life, and I don't really have a weird everyday life, but maybe I have a weird point of view, because for the package, to name it, which is the best example, there was a mailman ringing at my door, and he asked me if I could take a package for a neighbor. So now I'm living in Berlin in a very, very small street. And although I have a lot of problems with remembering names, after, I think, 12 years of living in the street, I thought I really knew every neighbor. But the name on the package didn't tell me anything. So I started thinking, if this would be the beginning of a thriller, well, this would be a really weird package. There would be a reason why I get this package. Maybe it's a strange neighbor, or maybe something is in it, and or what could the story be about it? So this was the first impulse for me to think over writing a thriller where a package plays a key role. So yeah, this comes out of my everyday life, but maybe with a different point of view on it.
Well, I'm guessing he didn't murder you.
No.
Is that
Actually,
a spoiler? No.
In reality, this is what was really lame. It was just an Airbnb.
Was it a finger?
For me?
Was it a finger? Was it bleeding?
No, nothing was in there. I mean, I smelled. I tried to shake something, and I was thinking, okay, the name is Parland on it. I thought, okay, maybe when I switch on the news in the evening, there's a news anchor telling me, oh, there's a guy named Parland. He broke out of a mental facility, and he's searching for a package, so be aware. And then my doorbell is ringing. So this is how my imagination works. But then usually I don't start to write, because I mean, having just an idea is worthless, to be honest. It's not a story. I mean, you know this better than me. So I started thinking, okay, who could be as paranoid as me when he or she gets a package for a neighbor? So I came up with Emma Stein, and she is a psychiatrist, and she's being raped in a hotel room, and some other cruel things are done to her, and she's paranoid that the one who did torture her will come back, because other victims he killed, and she stayed alive for any reason. So she's a psychiatrist who really knows what paranoia and the symptoms are about, and she knows that she's paranoid, but she can't do anything against this. It's like if you have a cough, you can tell the person just stop coughing, because you can't do anything about it. So she stays at home in a house in a very small street, where she spent all of her life, and she knows every neighbor, and she gets everything delivered. It's before COVID-19. It's she's so paranoid that she doesn't want to go out anymore. So, and then she gets a package from a neighbor. She doesn't know the name for a neighbor, and she starts to get paranoid, because she thinks there could be a connection to the one who tortured her in the hotel room. So this is how the story was built up in my mind. And when I had the characters, the main characters, and the plot, then I started writing.
Wow. You know, the most horrifying part of that entire story is that you know all your neighbors. I can't think of anything worse than having like when I go to the mailbox and I see people, I like COVID, I'm staying back, you know, and this is before COVID.
Yes.
So I'm like, yeah, you just go on. I don't need to know your name. Are you working on a book now?
Yes.
Are you affected by COVID, or is there something that you talk about in the book, or are you just ignoring it?
No, I'm not ignoring it. But I hope that COVID will be over maybe in 1 year. I hope that we all will be in a situation that when we look back and can tell our stories. Do you know? Can you remember what happened when we weren't allowed to go out? I mean, right now in Berlin, every shop is closed. The bookstores are open, actually, which is not in whole Germany, but in Berlin, the bookstores are open. but it's really it's a lockdown, and they're now on Monday they're just talking about that they will maybe extend the lockdown, and we all fear the mutant of the British.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
so
it's
what
brought out the personalities of the countries, though, right? Because Germans are like, yes, we'll do exactly what we're supposed to do. And Swedes are like, we know better than everybody else. And Denmark's
yeah.
like, oh, we'll see what everybody else is doing and we'll do what's best. And it's been very interesting to see different. And the Americans are like, fuck you, it's my right to die.
No, I think actually that Germans were really arrogant, because in the first wave, in the first lockdown, we thought, oh, we did such a good job, and then they did nothing in summer, and they even we looked at the U.S. and said, oh, it's going worse there, and they do nothing about this, and New York is in chaos, but we done good. So and then before Christmas, we in average we had more victims, unfortunately, people who died and suffered than in every other country, especially in the US. So it changed completely. We made a lot of mistakes, but still I'm crossing my finger that this pandemic will be over. And then when I'm riding on a scene, of course, I'm asking myself, there's somebody going into to the bus station or enters a cab. Will he or she wear the mask? They're not, but they are thinking about this. So
right.
Now it's even a fortune maybe that you can write sentence like that he or she is keeping the COVID distance.
Right.
I have little hints and little remarks, but I would never ever make COVID a center plot or a main factor.
Mine that I just did, I started in March, and I wanted to incorporate COVID into it. And I have a lawyer, and then the courts closed. I was like, crap. But then everybody was Zooming. So it was like every month they had to change how I was doing it. And then the vaccines came, and I was like, But fortunately, I anticipated how shitty our government would be. So like I was like, okay, I think I'm okay if I just set this in the spring of 2021, where we're looking back and looking forward. But
That's
I wonder though, like my grandmother survived the Great Depression, and every time we would go to a restaurant, she would steal all the sweetener off the table. And I wonder if like our generation, when we're old and, our grandchildren take us to dinner, if we'll steal all the toilet paper, right? Like how is this going to stick with us? Because it's such a trauma, right? And how are we going to recover from this?
It's like living in a dystopian novel. I never did think that it's not my favorite genre. And I thought this is, punishment for me who didn't want to read them, missed the Hunger Games, and now I get to live in it. So could I
talk watch The Walking Dead?
Yep. I'd like to talk to Sebastian a minute about Berlin, because I have some wonderful memories of Berlin. One of the great things about the Frankfurt Book Fair, which we went to for years, was touring all about. But we spent a week at the Hotel Adlon because I thought, A, I could pretend I'm a spy, and B, if I'm going to be in Berlin, I might as well go first class, right? Be by the arch. But here are the things I most remember about Berlin. One, it's one of the greatest museums, if not the greatest museum city ever. I mean, you can spend all day, every day getting lost, in one of the fabulous museums in Berlin. So that was fabulous. Department stores. I grew up in Chicago where Marshall Fields was like the center of the universe. I mean, I could get anywhere in Chicago if I could get to Marshall Fields. It was like a compass point. And I was so impressed with the department stores in Berlin. I mean, they are just, there's one particular, I never can pronounce it. It's like Sudewi or some such thing.
KDW. It's called the Mall of the West, and the German in American language it would be MOW, and it's KDW, which is Kaufhaus des Westens, KDW.
Right. Well, it's really spectacular. The third thing I remember is great transportation, wonderful subway system, Went out to Potsdam and, all of that. And that was spectacular. Fourth is the parks, because they're really magnificent parks. But the fifth one, this is why I brought it up, because it's so funny. My husband is like a human dowser for restaurants. Karin knows him well. So wherever we go, he just latches on to the best restaurants. I don't know how he does it. It's like osmosis or something. Anyway, it would be typical of Rob to have mapped out dining every night in Berlin. So there was one very old German restaurant we went to where everybody and the wait staff were German. And then we went to like 4 fabulous German restaurants, and everyone on the wait staff was American. And I just couldn't get my head around it. So finally I stopped one of the waiters one night and I said, what? Why are you all American here working this restaurant? He said, most of us who are in the restaurant business in Berlin were from Brooklyn. And I said, why? And he said, because it's so expensive to live in Manhattan and Brooklyn, he said, but you can get exactly the same atmosphere in Berlin and you can afford it. So I thought it was so interesting, that Berlin is like Manhattan, but on a different level. So I was fascinated with it.
Yeah, it's very kind that you're saying this. I think that some Berliners have a different view because it's you visited the right parts of Berlin. Let's put it this way. There are other parts where would you have made a totally different experience.
Of course, I started at the Adlon, so it was pretty obvious.
Yeah, at the Adlon around, so it's Prenzlauer Berg and Mitte, which are more like, okay, maybe you compare it to Greenwich Village, and there are beautiful restaurants and clubs and bars which are all now suffering because they're all closed. It's so it's really, it changed. It becomes more and more expensive, but compared to other capitals in Europe and especially in the whole world, I think it's one of the cheapest capital. Yeah, you can say this. The former mayor, Wowerei was his name, he said, Berlin is poor but sexy.
Well, I think it was affordable housing that had a great deal to do with, the cost of living, and why people, could live basically a Manhattan life, but on a not 8 people to a small apartment like you'd have to do in New York for the same thing.
Yeah, compared to London or New York or Paris, it's still a huge difference. But compared to other German cities, now it's much more equal. But the thing is that a lot of people want to come to Berlin, want to stay in Berlin, which is really fine. But the German government, the Berlin government, they don't build as many flats as were necessary, or have the so there are more people coming into it. It's really a big problem that we have too less, how you say this, flats, and which are affordable right now. This changes right now.
Well, it's a fabulous city to write about. Let me ask Patrick if he has questions from the audience or questions of his own he would like to introduce here.
We have a lot of people watching all over the world. It's pretty cool to see it. Poland, lots of people from Germany, of course, Denmark, everybody.
Great.
Let's see. I have someone named Claudia from Germany says, 2 of my favorite authors, please write a book together.
Oh, there's a good idea. I like that. Karin and Sebastian, right, together. Wonderful.
Fun. I love Berlin.
Yeah. So good idea.
Why don't you just keep going for a little while?
Oh, okay. Patrick's filtering his way through the questions. He may have a language issue there. So let me, I always like to give fans hope that there will be another book from favorite authors. So let me ask Karin first. What are you working on at the moment, kiddo? Because you were here with me in, when was it? This summer when you did your last Will Trent book. So what's coming up for you?
It's called False Witness. I just finished it. I'm very excited about it. Yeah. I really think people are going to like it. I love it. So if you don't, something's wrong with you.
Is it a Will Trent or is it?
No, it's a standalone. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. It's like I was telling you earlier, it has COVID incorporated into it, and
Well, that
people.
makes it a lot of fun. Sure. I know
Yeah.
your definition of fun is not mine, but
Well, I love Catherine Ann Porter, and she wrote the novella about her bout with the flu and all of that. And it was really interesting to read. And I thought, listen, Sebastian, you do this too. You write books very of the moment, right? And I thought it's probably why you chose to incorporate post-COVID into it. But I just wanted to have like some kind of testament to how crazy it is. And writing about it was like brought out some PTSD, because I was like, I cannot believe we live like this, that this is like in a year, our lives have changed so much.
they really have. Sebastian,
me,
what are you working on?
I'm working on a psychological thriller where music plays a key element, and certain songs, so by the very beginning process. So it will take some time. I have to write it. It has to be published, and then it will be translated. So if I'm lucky, and it will be translated as well into the English language, I think this could take 2 more years till you could read it.
Isn't there like a famous studio that was right on the wall, like where recording artists went?
I think there's the Hansa Studio in Berlin, which is I thought if the story is about no, but the Hansa Studio, there was U2, for example. They recorded there David Bowie after he died. I think I'm not sure if they really changed the name of the street because they wanted to rename it. There was a discussion. I'm not sure if they did this, but there are a lot of artists like Depeche Mode, and everyone was recording there.
Yeah, good music thing. I can't wait to read that. That sounds interesting.
It does. Now, I just did a wonderful thing, which is I actually opened your book, because I spend my life reading advanced reading copies, so I hardly ever read a real book. And I just opened the copy of the package, and guess what I found inside?
There is finger.
Nifty. No, there is a nifty little signed book plate, which is in fact the package. Is like a little UPS thing, and I'm assuming that this is Simon's scrawled Sebastian. Sorry, I don't know why I'm calling you Simon. Sebastian's, that your signature, Sebastian?
Hold it up a little. Hold it up.
Yeah, but it's my signature. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's worse than mine. I love it.
Anyway,
I mean, signatures are always worse because you don't want to make easy to.
That's right.
Right.
Copy.
Anyway, our copies, I'm happy to say, have this wonderful signed book plate inside. So if I hadn't opened the book, I wouldn't have realized that I could make a little commercial pitch here for. And the way the whole thing is packaged is in fact like a package. So we have UPS, Sebastian. What is your equivalent in Germany? Is it DHL or what?
We have UPS as well. We have DHL,
Right.
and we have what do we have? Other kind of parcel service. Amazon now, it's its own parcel service doing in Berlin and all over Germany.
Well, certainly one of the consequences of COVID and increase in online shopping is we're all even more familiar with how packages look. But the other morning, we were sitting having coffee in the library, Dana Stabenow, who's once again wintering with us, and my husband and I, and it was like 6:20, so it's really dark. And suddenly there was a flash of light by the front door, and Rob and I both went, "Oh my God, lightning," and it almost struck the house. So we opened the door to see what it was. It was an Amazon package that the driver had just dropped at 6:20, and the light was from him scanning, the package for delivery. It was just like, really? They're here at 6:20? But Patrick, back to you.
There are a couple new questions that have come in. I guess this is for both of you, and it would be, how long does it take each of you to write the average manuscript?
Sebastian?
Well, the writing process starts when I think that I know the plot. It changes during the writing, but I have a expose of maybe a treatment of 20 pages. and then I started writing. But this can take sometimes years from the very first idea to when I start writing. That when I start writing, it takes me about 3 or 4 months, and I'm writing on an everyday basis. And I try to have the first draft, and then after this first draft, the rewriting process begins. And I have 2 editors, the publishing house, and it goes back and forth. So it's hard to say how long it is, because I'm not working every day as a writer. I'm doing research, or maybe I'm just thinking, and then I start writing. So, but in average, it's something between 9 or 12 months what it takes for me to get from the first sentence till the book is at the bookstore.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way, except I only have 1 editor.
All right.
Okay.
Another question?
Yes, I'm gonna blow the pronunciation here. But Kim, Larissa has a couple of questions. One for Karin. She says that she really misses Jeffrey Tolliver. Do you ever miss writing those stories?
I do, but he's in the last book I wrote posthumously. Not me, him. An old case shows up. So if you want to see Jeffrey again, that was a lot of fun. I mean, to just go back and write something that I haven't written for many, many years. And I really enjoyed it. But it would be hard to think of another reason for him to show up again.
Right. Well, unless it was another cold case or something similar where you needed to do that, but maybe
Yeah, but
doing
the emotional punch wouldn't be there, right? They'd be
No.
like, oh yeah, it happened again.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Sebastian?
Well, Sebastian, the question for you is, and again, forgive me, Kim says, I loved Sebastian's, is it Augensammler? Is that close?
Yeah, it's
And-
The Eye Collector. It's a romantic title.
Augenjager, is that right?
The
Give
Eye
it up,
Hunter.
Patrick.
Because
The
I
Hunter and the Hunter, the Eye Collector Hunter. There's both in both. This is like a mini series. I usually write standalones, but those books belong together. And there's a blind physiotherapist. I'm not sure if that's the right word. Is in the key role. So yeah, it's the translation will be Eye Collector and Eye Hunter.
And I think her question is there any chance that you'll write a second book or a second installment for any of these standalone novels?
Well, actually, I'm writing. I think it was published in 2012, and when the Eye Collector was released, I told this would be the beginning of a trilogy. Then after the second book, I found out that the idea for the third book is not as good as I wanted it to be. So I stopped writing the third book, and everybody's asking me in Germany when the third book is coming out. And now I'm lucky that I found a plot, and actually the book that I'm writing on, where the music takes place, will be a standalone, but also the end of the Eye series. So yeah. There will be a third book, not as a second book to another standalone, but the third book in this trilogy.
Excellent.
And then let's see, Andy asks Sebastian, which books will Amazon Prime be coming out with as a series?
Well, it's a good question, because we just had a press release that Prime Video will make 3 of my books. They will adopt it into a series, but I would love to tell, but they don't want to. Yeah, because they're not really sure. They're working on several at the same time, and then they want to decide which one first came out, and they want to have the possibility maybe to change it. So they don't want to disappoint anybody. So I like talking about this, but they ask me, please don't. So I'm sorry, I can't tell the names, and even if I knew them, they could change.
Very good.
Sebastian, I got to say though, isn't it like, it's weird because as an author, when you present a book, you are like the sole source of information and everything about that book. But when you do an adaptation or whatever, you are the least important person in that entire process.
That's right.
You just have to sit back and say, that's great. Tell me when I can say this to other people.
That's totally right. Yeah.
It goes from being a solipsis act to a committee. So very difficult. Which reminds me, Karin, I just filled out the HarperCollins event grid and I see that your book is coming out in June.
Oh, wonderful.
So I think it's towards the end of June, but anyway, I hope that we'll be able to do this again. And who knows, we might get up a group to join in, it might be fun.
Absolutely.
Patrick's learned how to do webinars, so we're expanding our reach. So this is really, is there anything else before I say goodbye? I didn't want to cut off a question if there was one.
We have a couple more questions.
Well, go ahead, real quick.
It's only 1:45.
Oh, is it? Oh, I beg your pardon. You're right.
Okay, Sebastian, Maria asks, I just lost it. Oh, yes. Which of your books was the hardest for you to write?
Which of my books was actually it was the Eye Collector, because usually in the first draft I even can write about things which I haven't discovered on my own places, and to make my mind up, and then I make the fact check afterwards. But when I was writing about a blind protagonist, the easiest situation for me was impossible to write, because like a scene, her name is Alina, she came home and she's blind. So, and I was thinking to myself, okay, what will she do? Will she switch on the lights? No, that's not, there's no sense in it. By the way, are there light bulbs in the lamps? Are there mirrors at the wall? What was with art? Does she have paintings at the wall? So I have no clue what to write. So I went on Twitter and I said that in my next novel, there will be a blind protagonist in the center. And I received a lot of reactions, like blind persons were writing to me, say, oh, please don't write as much bullshit as other do, especially in Hollywood movies. And I say, oh, okay. The first thing was, wow, there's so many people who can't see on Twitter or Facebook or everywhere, because they have the ability to check the media. And then I started a telephone group with 12 people who had problems with seeing or were blind, and they really, I had to interview them, and they told me so many facts about their life, which were so amazing. And to give the answer, they said, yeah, of course we have light bulbs, and of course we have mirrors, and of course we have painting on the wall, because we have friends who can see, and that we don't want them to sit in the dark and to stare at the naked wall. So I could come up with this by myself, but I was really happy to have those consultants, and but it was hard because I had to double check every scene.
Well, I have one last question if you want, or unless you had something first.
He does have another one.
Okay.
Right.
Well, Karin, is there any truth to the rumor that you're planning a book that's told from the first person perspective of a cat?
No catmint.
Was that a real question? No.
No, that wasn't a real question.
I feel like The Naked Wall would be like a Dave Barry book. My question is for Mr. Fitzek here, because I loved the package. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the idea was like, I seldom am like read a book and I think, why didn't I think of that? Because I too get packages. But if they're for my neighbors, I don't know. I just see what's inside.
Yeah.
But I really love this book. And I think people should read it. But what is, other than me, of course, what is a book right now that you're reading that you're really excited about? And don't pick an American unless it is, because this is an international audience.
Yeah. So actually, I like to maybe promote a German author as well. Her name is Melanie Rabe. She now her newest novel came up, but I would like to start with her first novel, which is, I think the translation is named The Trap, and it's a psychological thriller, and an author is in the center of it, and it's really it's different to what I write. It's a dark story, psychological thriller, but it's not very cruel, but it has a lot of tension, and so maybe you look out for Melanie Rabe. I think that it's spelled Raabe, her last name, and I just saw before I went online that their latest novel was translated and released in the US, and she was listed at the 25 Black authors you should read. And she's from Germany, she's from eastern part of Germany, and has she's a very strong personality, and I like what she's doing.
Fantastic. Great recommendation.
It is indeed. I'm looking her up to see if I can find her. Rahbe.
Raabe, Melanie,
Right.
and The Trap. But she has 3 novels,
I
and
found
they
her.
are
Right. Okay.
I'm sure you can order it at Poison Pen tomorrow if you are interested.
It's called The Trap, The Shadow, and The Stranger. And The
That's
Trap is the most recent one, right? And it is
Trap and The Shadow are my most favorite.
Right. Very nice. Well, thank you. It's always great to be introduced to a new author. Karin, you haven't read her, and I haven't read her. So
Great.
a
Looking
true
forward to it.
surprise. Yep.
Maybe to give an answer of an unasked question is, but my one of my really favorite novel from Karin is Pretty Girls. I really
thank
I
you.
really was, yeah. I had as turning points. I was hooked on it, and it couldn't stop.
Thank you. That was a
Sorry,
really
my
neat
phone chimed
story.
in. Yeah, I wanted to ask Karin before we quit. I thought it was an interesting question to ask Sebastian about what was the most difficult novel for him to write. What was the hardest one so far for you to write? We're 20 plus now, so you've had lots of different.
Yeah, it's always the one I'm working on right now. And my favorite one is the one I just am going to write next.
Right, because it's still perfect, right? It's still
yeah.
absolutely perfect.
Well, it's sort of like everybody gets mad about the Academy Awards, but they don't realize that the people voting on it are in the business and looking for specific things in relation to how they approach the business, right? So an actor is going to look at the acting, and I think with writers, Sebastian, maybe you agree with this. I mean, if a book is complicated or difficult, you love it for different reasons than maybe the writer does, because you're kind of like, wow, I really pulled off this perspective, or I wrote that scene in a way I've never written before. And, and nobody notices it except you and maybe your editor. It's like, that is so beautiful. And they're like, when's the next book? But you love them for different reasons, right?
That's right.
It's interesting to host a book club and listen to the different reasons why people like or don't like a book. And every once in a while, when doing that, you think, seriously, do we all read the same book? It almost seems impossible.
But also, it's very interesting if you ask the reader to describe how does the main character look like. And they made an experiment, and they gave the same book to 50 men and 50 women. And while the men, they were really they followed the description from the author. The woman mostly had completely different types of characters in her mind. They made her own mind up, which says a lot of female imagination, I guess, which is a little bit different to men imagination, where very strict, and they say, well, if he writes that this is a blonde guy, then it's a blonde guy.
Yeah. Do you have do you say on your Facebook page or whatever, what actress would play this character? Or what? I write about a guy named Will Trent who's like 6'4" and has sandy blonde hair, and they'll suggest Eric Estrada, or it's like, where did that come? Do you do that though on your whatever your social media, and it's just shocking?
No,
do they
haven't-
recommend?
I never did this because I always try not to ruin the imagination. For example, like Dan Brown, when he writes a new novel in Germany, we always think about Tom Hanks if he has a
Right,
main
yeah.
character. So and I think it's a good thing of that a reader can be the director of her or his own film. And
Yeah,
I
I
think this
agree.
is the reason why people are saying that the book is better than the film, because
Right.
they already have a movie in their head. So, and why does any other movie should be better than the one that I directed?
That is
Agreed.
such an excellent point. I couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to mention, because we're going to sign off, that interestingly enough, we mentioned that this publisher, Head of Zeus, does really interesting books. There is no dust jacket on this book. This is, in fact, the book. I just dropped your fabulous signed book plate. Sorry, I'll retrieve it. But it's interesting because it's the boards of the book that have the images on them. And I really, I find that fascinating. There are people who like to buy books just for the packaging, whether they ever read it or not. And, there are regrettably companies that actually sell books by the yard as decoration, but fortunately that's not what we do here at the Poison Pen. It's really been just a delight to meet you, Sebastian.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Karin, this wouldn't have been half as much fun without you. You're always a fabulous interviewer. And,
Well, I hope that Sebastian isn't scared off and we get to do this in person eventually.
I'm crossing my fingers. And when you come to Berlin or Germany, just let me know. And especially there are some restaurants which are not so known, but they are very exciting, and I would love to take you out. So
Absolutely.
whenever this pandemic is over and we're allowed to travel again, then
Absolutely. And
I
you're
hope
welcome
that
to
we
come
can
to
meet in
Atlanta.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it sounds
Great.
wonderful. And maybe you'll go to a German restaurant with actual German wait staff.
Maybe.
It should be fun. So thanks so much,
It will be
everybody.
difficult.
Right. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you who joined us this afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. It was a great honor, a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.